Hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space, and what will most likely be my last Halloween video for 2023. The time is nigh. So, I have plenty of Halloween content though. All the videos I've done this year, which are, I think I've done over 30, well over 30 altogether between the live streams and then all my regular Halloween videos. All of those are in a playlist linked at the end of this video. And I couldn't resist doing at least one more. You know, the ideas don't stop. It's just time doesn't stop. And I need more of it. Anyway, I did some watercolor using spray stains. I've done this in the past. I can't even remember how long it's been. But in my previous Halloween video, I just did very simple watercolor using just black soot distress ink. Just smushing it on a little palette, and I watercolored with it. And I was thinking while I was doing it, and I was like, I haven't used my spray stains in a while, and I really like watercoloring with them. Do you need spray stains to watercolor? No, you can just use distress inks. You can use watercolors. You can use whatever you want. I like watercoloring with the spray stains among spraying with them, which I also do that, because they're in a liquid consistency, but they're already very saturated, and there is a difference. Because I get asked that, can you just use reinkers? You can. I don't like using distress reinkers to watercolor with, and I've done many videos, again, in the past, there's many on my channel, using distress reinkers. The reason why I'm not as big of a fan is because if you don't add enough water when you're using distress reinkers, they're never going to dry. Because that's what they're formulated for, is for like re-inking your distress ink pads. And they've got additives in them, in the distress reinkers, to keep them from just drying out. Because they need to like sit in your ink pad, etc. And when you're using it concentrated right from the distress reinker bottle, again, if you don't add enough water, they just won't dry. So I found that when I wanted like really saturated color, I was getting too much reinker, and then my backgrounds or whatever I was coloring weren't drying, and I was getting really frustrated. But using the spray stains, I can get the results I want, and they dry. So again, it's all just personal preference, all the things. Now using a reinker versus, well, why not just smush your ink pad? Kind of similar, but when you smush your ink pad onto a little palette and watercolor with that, you're getting much less of the ink, and again, you're needing more water. That's kind of, I hope that makes sense. So again, you just got to experiment, play around with it, see what works. But this just gives me another excuse to use my spray stains. I will eventually actually have them up on the wall. That has been my plan for a while. I keep mine in a drawer in one of my IKEA units, and it's been driving me insane for months now because I pull open the drawer and I can't find the colors. So I want to put them all in rainbow order on the wall. Working towards it. Because then once they're out where I can see them, I'm going to use them more. Anyway, did some watercoloring with those. I added Mica spray stains, watercolor with those too. Same thing, done videos on that. I spray backgrounds. I just went all out because it's like go big or go home. This is the last Halloween video. It's super, super fun. Like I said, I'll have a link to the playlist at the end, and keep watching and I'll show you guys how I made these cards. I started with the Simon Says Stamp Just Batty stamp set, which I have done a couple of videos on. This stamp set was part of the limited edition Halloween kit that they released back in September, and I did a video using the stencil set. I've done 1 or 2 videos already, like using other elements of the set. Yeah, I've done at least a couple of videos. Anyway, they're all in the Halloween series. And the set is available individually because, of course, the kit is sold out. So, I have my MISTI, and I have some distress watercolor paper in the MISTI. I use my anti-static powder tool on it. And I'm stamping this cluster of jack-o'-lanterns and the little ghosty with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. And I'm going to ink them up and stamp them a couple times to make sure I get just all the detail stamped. And then I'm going to heat emboss these with clear embossing powder. You don't need to heat emboss them. This just makes my life a little bit easier. And yeah, I did think about using black embossing powder. People have been like questioning my sanity because Yeah, you go on for 2 decades about hating black embossing powder, and then basically I think just this year I've been like, and then I use black embossing powder, and people are like, are you okay? Hey, it works now for me. Who knows? But stamping it with the black ink and then embossing in clear is great. It works great too. The only difference is just with black embossing powder, it's just more black. With something like this, it doesn't matter. It works. It looks good. So I did all that first. Then I'm going to put it back in my MISTI, reapplied the anti-static powder, and I'm going to stamp the Raven from the set. And this I'm going to emboss with black glitter embossing powder. Could I have done the whole thing with black glitter? Yeah, but I wanted him to stand out. Even though he's a raven, in my head, it's kind of like magpie-esque, you know, and glitter, and I don't know, but that's just where my brain goes. And it just gives him a little extra something. Since he's a solid image, I can't color him in, so I gave him some bling. So I stamped him like the other ones with the VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, and then coated him with black glitter embossing powder. Melted that with my heat tool. And then I'm going to watercolor in these images. And I will link to every single spray stain and mica spray stain that I used, because I used a bunch. Like I said, I went big. I was having fun. So first off, with the mica stains, because that mica settles, that is gravity. Got to shake them up real well. Even when applying them to a palette like this, you want to shake it up really well. Get everything dispersed. And then I've just got my little plastic palette here, and I'm just putting little droplets. You don't need much. Like, I honestly didn't apply much here, and I still had more than I needed. So for the spray stains, like specifically the pumpkins, I'm going to use Carved Pumpkin, of course, spray stain, and Crackling Campfire spray stain, and Mulled Cider mica stain. For the stems, I'm going to use Ground Espresso spray stain and Fallen Acorn Distress mica stain. And I also pulled out a Harvest Moon mica stain. I'm going to use that on the centers of the jack, like the insides of the jack-o'-lanterns. You know, they're lit up. So, yeah, and then I'll get up to the rest of the colors. So for the pumpkins, start off with the Carved Pumpkin. And then I picked up a little bit of the Crackling Campfire. And then I'm using some of the Mulled Cider mica stain. And with the mica stains, specifically, and I've talked about this in other videos, when you apply them to a palette like this, gravity still applies. You know, the rules still apply. So all the mica settles to the bottom of the little blobs of ink I have there. So if you want that shimmer, you have to swirl your brush in it to get the shimmer. If you just lightly touch your brush to the little blobs of ink, you're just getting the ink, like the stain portion of the mica stain, but you're not getting the shimmer. So I'm just using my little Tim Holtz detail water brush. That's just my brush of choice when I'm using distressed products. It's convenient. And I do have a cloth kind of off to the side, like off camera, that I wipe in between colors. Also, sometimes when the brush decides to be a little bit finicky, disperse a little bit too much water. I generally don't have problems with this one. Like this little Tim Holtz detail water brush, I have been using this thing for years. I have a couple backups of it just in case I wreck it. But it's been the same one. It's stained, like the little bristles are completely stained, but this thing just works, and I don't even know how many years I've had it. So, painted all the pumpkins with the Carved Pumpkin and Crackling Campfire Distress spray stain with that Mulled Cider mica stain. Then their faces, the carvings, the carved openings, I used the Carved Pumpkin just a little bit later, and then in the centers, like in the openings, I applied on top of it the Harvest Moon mica stain, and that will sit on top, and there'll be that kind of yellow glow to it. And then the stems, that was a bit of the Ground Espresso spray stain, and then I add in just a bit of the Fallen Acorn mica stain to give it a bit of shimmer. And then for my little ghosty dudes, I used Lost Shadow spray stain, Speckled Egg spray stain, and then just a little bit of Phantom Mist mica stain. And just a light hand with all of it, because they're ghosts. But this just gives them a bit of shading, a bit of depth. And honest, I love how the ghost turned out. Just as it, dried, I was like, yes. And they shimmer and sparkle. And, oh, you guys, I had the hardest time at filming. I can't even tell you how much footage I had filming the end of this, because I'll still show, at the end with my flashlight and everything. My camera was just not today. Just no, I'm not going to work with you. Oh, frustrating, because it was everything was so shimmery and sparkly, and I was having so much fun, and then my camera was just like, no. Anyway, I watercolored all those images, just simple. And then when I was done, I let them dry, which didn't take very long. And then I used the coordinating wafer dies and die cut them out. So I taped the wafer dies into place with little bits of washi tape just to hold those wafer dies so they don't shift when I run them through my die cut machine. After I die cut them, put the wafer dies back. I just keep them in the packaging with the stamp set. And then got everything out of the way, put my die cut machine on camera, and I'm going to emboss a couple backgrounds. And I'm going to use Simon Says Stamps, another oldie but goodie favorite of mine, the Tangled Web 3D embossing folder. And for me and my Spellbinders Platinum 6 machine, and specifically Simon's 3D embossing folders, I use the original platform, 2 metal shims, the cardstock of choice, and the folder. And that just, I get the best impression that way. I always spray my cardstock of choice. I'm using Ranger watercolor paper for this as well. And spraying it with water just softens everything a little bit so I get a better impression. And that especially comes in handy with embossing folders like this, where you have when you have a lot of straight lines, that's where you're going to see more often like cracking in your cardstock. It's just the nature of something that has like straight lines. But a lot of other patterns and different things you generally won't have issues with. But one like this, it can happen. So spraying the cardstock, like adding that little bit of moisture, does help. So after I emboss them, I trim them down just a bit. I just took like a 1/4 inch off 2 of the sides, so it ends up being like 4 by 5 1/4, so that they'll be slightly smaller than my A2 card base. And then I stuck these in my splat box, and oh, I went to town with the sprays. I had fun. I had them everywhere. It was everywhere. So I used crushed olive spray stain, the ground espresso along the bottom. I added salvage patina, and then I added chipped sapphire. And then I went in and added some of that Phantom Mist mica stain, kind of just splotched it on towards the upper areas, kind of thinking like sky, you know. And then along the bottom, I splotched on some fallen acorn. These are very technical terms, you know, very artistic, very professional. AKA I mucked around and had fun. You don't need to like heat set this or speed up the drawing process. I did it because I was doing more than one and I'm impatient, and I was like, depending on whether or not, I want to add more layers, anything like that. So I use my Ranger Heat It tool. You can also use your like heat tool for embossing. Either one's going to work, but I just sped up the drying process, and also because I'm impatient, and it obviously looks completely different when it's dry versus when it's wet. So I dried it and I was happy with it. I wasn't going to add anything else. I wasn't going to add anything else to it now. I will later. And yeah, this is why I love spray stains. I never thought I would get into sprays in any way, shape, or form, honestly. I think I've talked about this before, but because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I do ink blending and just the way I make cards. And honestly, I find sprays, they're just so fun because I have less control. And they're just going to do what they want to do. And I end up with results that I cannot duplicate on my own with just inks and ink blending, etc. And even doing these backgrounds, like that's also why I like doing more than one, because doing the exact same thing, exact same backgrounds, embossing folders, cardstock, colors, they still turn out different. And I love it. I love how the colors just kind of run. And with the embossing folder, it traps some of the little areas, and it's just, I love it. I love it. So yeah, I use the exact same colors. I use the crushed olive, ground espresso, salvage patina, chipped sapphire, and then added that Phantom Mist mica stain and fallen acorn mica stain. And I just ended up with these two really fun, almost shattered glass, like stained glass that got shattered sort of a look, which just, I love it. I love it. It's fun. So I set those aside. And then I die cut some black cardstock using the GOURD wafer die, which I used in another, it was one of my Halloween live streams. And I've used it in other videos. You can actually see it on the Simon Says Stamp product page for this die set, because they always include examples and stuff. And the previous cards and videos I've done, they're listed on there as well, which sometimes is a nice reminder because I forget sometimes some of the things I've made. Anyway, I love punny sentiments, and this one just makes me giggle. and it was perfect to go with those pumpkins. So I die cut them twice, layered the 2 layers together. I only did 2. Usually I do like 3, but 2 was enough. And then after I adhered them together just with craft tacky glue, I stuck these in my spot box and I lightly misted Empty Tomb Distress Mica stain over these. Oh, the combo of black cardstock and Empty Tomb, chef's kiss. It's not quite gunmetal. I would consider it's darker because of the black cardstock, but it's just, there's something, but I really like it. I really like it. So anyway, I sprayed those. I set those aside to dry. I grabbed some dark chocolate cardstock, put that in my MISTI, used my anti-static powder tool, stamping another punny sentiment. This one from that same stamp set, the Just Batty stamp set. There's a sentiment that says, let the gourd times roll. Love it. So inked that up with clear embossing ink. And then I just flipped the cardstock around, repeated the process. So I've got it stamped twice. And then I used just white embossing powder. Covered the sentiments with that. I'm going to melt that with my heat tool. And then once these are melted, I wasn't filming. Like, I turned off my camera, or I don't even know what happens some days. I swear, some days my camera just doesn't like me. But anyway, after I was done melting it, let it cool off for a few seconds. I just used my microfiber cloth to remove that excess anti-static powder. And then I used my Simon Says Stamp Sentiment Labels wafer dies. I have 2 sets of these because I use them so much. I bought a second set so that I can do things like this. It saves me like a whole 30 seconds of my time, which adds up, you know, with all the cards I make. So I die cut those sentiments, set those aside as well. And then my card bases are top folding A2 white note cards. I lined those up in my MISTI, and I lined up the row of jack-o'-lanterns along the bottom of the inside of the card. And then I lined up the big Happy Halloween sentiment stamps from that set along like kind of the center of the inside of the card. And I inked those up with the Simon Says Stamps Peachy Positively Saturated ink. And then the sentiment I inked up with Simon's Charcoal Positively Saturated ink. Lined up the second card base, repeated the process. So just inked them up with those 2 inks, closed the lid, pressed it down. The insides of the card are complete. This is where I wanted to add more to the backgrounds. You could totally skip this. You could also do like a little bit of white paint and a brayer, or white pigment ink and a brayer would kind of work. Although the pigment, if you went with pigment ink, it would absorb more into the cardstock and absorb the colors, so it wouldn't show up as much. So I would say either use white paint or do something like this. And this is just Picket Fence Paper Glaze in Snowdrop White. I just stuck a little dab of this onto my glasswork surface, and then I'm picking it up with my finger, and I'm just really lightly tapping my finger in it so I don't have like a blob of it on my finger, just a little bit. And then I'm just gently rubbing my finger on the raised areas of these backgrounds so it kind of picks up the web so that the white shows the web a little bit more. It just gives it a little extra something. And I don't mind getting my fingers mucky like this. I can wipe it off. It's when things are sticky that it drives me insane. I don't like sticky stuff, but this doesn't bother me. However, if it does, you could also use like a little blending foam. That would work too. You just have to move a little quicker if you want to like preserve the blending foam, because once stuff pastes like this dry in a blending foam, it just wrecks them. That's why I just use my fingers. So applied this again. It doesn't need to be perfect at all. It's going to be a little bit messy, a little bit smeary. That's great. Like the background is messy and smeary and drippy, and they're Halloween cards, and it's really fun. So I just added it here and there. I didn't bother adding it to like every single spot. It was more kind of that center, like where the web meets in the center, that I really wanted to highlight, because that's my favorite part of this embossing folder. And then just kind of highlighted some of the other little areas. And then once that was done, I just wiped off my finger, wiped off my work surface. You kind of, with my glass work surface, you got to put a tiny bit of elbow grease in there, but it comes right off and we're good to go. So after I did that, that paste, applying paste like that, or like the paper glaze from Picket Fence, when you apply it this way, like with your fingers or just really thin, it dries almost immediately. So we're good to go. I'm applying craft tacky glue to the back of these backgrounds and adhering them to my card bases. This is also another perk of doing more than one card in a sitting, is I can use one card to figure out my layout, and then I just follow it on the second card. But another option, and I've shown some videos too, is to like figure out your layout and then just take a picture of it and then use that. I've done that. I've also taken a picture of it and then forgot to reference the picture on my phone. You know, because that's just how it is. So at least when I actually do make 2 cards, it's right in front of my face, even though my phone is always right there. Anyway, I adhered the sentiment strip along the bottom with craft tacky glue, and I adhered the little ghosty with craft tacky glue, and I also adhered the Oh My Gourd die cut sentiment with craft tacky glue. And once those were adhered into place, the row of jack-o'-lanterns I'm popping up, which is a little bit of dimension. I'm using Simon's Big Mama foam tape. So we've got a bit of dimension so that they can sit a little bit higher. So adhered those, and I did the same thing with my sparkly fabulous Raven. Put a little bit of that foam tape on the back of him, adhered him into place, and then I flipped the cards over and just trimmed off the little bits that were hanging off the sides so that these will fit in standard A2 sized envelopes. And then of course I had bling that would go with it. These are the Simon Says Stamp Orange Leaves Confetti. So kind of went through, figured out my placement, and like I always do, I figure out my placement on one and then I just copy it on the second one. It just makes life easier. So once I had my bling placement, you know, and I was happy with it, I just adhered those into place with little dabs of the craft tacky glue, and that's going to finish off these cards. So I am going to struggle to show the actual shimmer glitter backgrounds because my camera, which just, I do not know. I've never had a problem, really. I've always been able to show it to you guys, and my camera was just like, no, just no. Every time I was turning on my flashlight and like really trying to show the sparkle, it would just completely went out of focus. And usually it doesn't frustrate me like that. But I tried over and over and over again, and it was just so frustrating because the sparkle's really pretty. Like on the pumpkins, there's the like deep orange sparkle from the malt cider, and then the harvest moon sparkle in their face holes, and then the sparkle in the background, and the sparkle in the ghost, and just anyway, it's there. It's fabulous. Anyway, I tried, and I finally had to give up because I was just back and forth, but you can kind of see some of the sparkle. It's there, and it's amazing. So, anywho, like I mentioned in the intro, I will have a link to my Halloween playlist. That'll be at the end of the video. I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I'll have my supply list. I'll link to everything I used. You can check that out in the description box below the video if you are interested. And stay tuned. I have tons more videos coming, as always. And as always, thank you guys so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping and commenting. Subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.